Hi folks, welcome to another video, and today I thought it would be a really nice idea to do a bit of a comparison between an unlacquered Yanagisawa Alto and a lacquered one. Such a popular brand is Yanagisawa, and so many of you buying these AWO1s and 10s and 20s, and you're probably wondering just what are the differences between unlacquered and lacquered. And I'm sure you've got a basic idea and sort of thought process as to what the differences may be, but perhaps you've never seen one compared back to back, a lacquered versus an unlacquered. So I thought I'd try and demonstrate that to you today and discuss it a little bit. So what's really interesting for me in my discoveries while sort of prepping for this yesterday was that I have the position to be able to unbox an unlacquered Yanagisawa straight out of the box. So this isn't one that's been on display for a week or 2 weeks or longer. This is one that's literally been freshly unboxed. Here is the case right here. It came out of this bag. And what's intriguing, and what's always been my sort of perception of these things, is that specifically with Yanagisawas and Yamahas, where they do offer choices of unlacquered versus lacquered, initially to the eye they look identical. So first of all, I should explain that this model, this one and this one here, is identical in every aspect, mechanical, build, construction, except for the lacquer, the fact that this one doesn't have lacquer and this one does have lacquer. And even just to hold them here, one in front of the other, they look pretty much identical. That is until I actually got my hands on this unlacquered one. I started feeling the finish, just touching the brass, and I realized that there's a little bit of a catch to the sort of reaction between the skin and the brass. It feels almost sticky, if you like. There's a little bit of grip there, whereas when I move on to the lacquered one, you sort of slide over it a little bit more. It's slightly more sort of oily and slippery feeling. So that's the sort of first thing, because it was always a worry of mine before. They don't actually mark these as AWO1 or you know, in this version here, this is the brass one. They don't actually distinguish between them. It is just printed as AWO1 on both of them. So you have to make sure you don't get them muddled up, or certainly look at the serial numbers. Keep an eye on that to make sure you're not confusing them. But clearly there is a difference in the sort of physical touch. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that occurred to me is visually, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to point this out to the cameras right now, but the gold lacquered one, for me, just has a little bit more of a gold hue to it in its sort of finish and its shine. Whereas the unlacquered one, for my money, when I was staring at it yesterday and going crazy trying to figure out the differences, just has a little bit more of a sort of metallic, reflective, greeny, blacky sort of hue to it, compared to the sort of, yeah, just as I say, the kind of gold hue that we're getting with this one. It's very subtle. I doubt you can see it right now. Perhaps when we do some close-ups later on in the edit of this video, you might be able to pick that out. But I suppose the main point is that initially, to the eye, they look pretty much identical. And this is how an unlacquered Yanagisawa comes straight out of the box. It really just looks like a lacquered one. But given time, and we're not talking that much time, we're talking weeks, certainly months, this will change quite some bit. I've got behind me here my own sax, which is just my tenor Andy Shepherd autograph, and I mean, you can clearly see that this is such a different beast, but this is an unlacquered sax, several years old, and it looks like a vintage horn. And that's the point. The unlacquered new saxophones very quickly take on the sort of form of a vintage instrument in their appearance, because there's no lacquer there protecting the saxophone from the elements, from oxygen, from the touch, from acid fingers, which is something that we all have. So it really doesn't take that long. As I say, you know, within weeks you will see a difference in the appearance of this saxophone. So that's that bit out of the way. So really, this is going to be an exercise in sound, and I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'm just going to get on and play, and then we shall discuss. Okay, so there we are. Now, for my money, that's a very subtle difference indeed. So whether you're going to hear anything at home, I don't know, but a big part of it for me is the way it feels, the vibrations I'm getting as a player that I can physically feel as I'm blowing down it. But it's such a subtle thing. And believe me, yesterday I was going back and forward just playing individual notes to try and pick out those differences. It's also tempting to try and push the sound a little bit more on the unlacquered one because we feel that the sound should be more open on an unlacquered instrument. But that is the general vibe of these things. So first of all, I played the lacquered version and then I played the unlacquered version. I was trying to sort of play tonal stuff as opposed to anything flashy for obvious reasons. But for me, I just feel that in the unlacquered one, the sound is allowed to be released a little bit more. It's not as restrained or rounded in the same way that I feel it is with the lacquered one. I suppose in technical terms, I'm feeling or hearing more higher partials, or in layman's terms, a brighter tone in the unlacquered one. So, and that's particularly prominent in the higher register. So as I was hitting that sort of top G, F area, you could kind of hear it ringing through. But also just in general, through the whole sound spectrum, you hear those higher partials. So I was trying to give you a full range there, top G, and there was a bottom B there, so you could hear the whole thing. So I'm going to be interested to see how it comes out when you're actually just listening on a laptop, for example, although I'd probably recommend and advise that you listen on, sort of noise isolating headphones or something like that if you really want to hear the differences. But for me, it's obviously the same tonal character. It's a Yanagisawa comparing with another Yanagisawa. It's a layer of lacquer that is the difference. So it's pretty blindingly obvious that we're dealing with very subtle differences. But that difference of just a little bit more presence in the sound can be enough for some of you guys out there to select an unlacquered one as opposed to a lacquered one. So that's interesting enough in itself. But another aspect to it is perhaps a psychological one. If you like some of those unlacquered horns of old and you feel you want to have that sort of vintage kind of vibe, well, it will soon look very vintagey, as in this example here. So the look will be radically different after a period of time. But other than that, I've not really got a huge amount more to say on the subject, other than I just thought it'd be good to sort of do a reality check, if you like. It's a little bit of a myth buster, for all those of you out there who just think there is such a massive difference. Clearly, it's not a massive difference. It's very subtle, but perhaps subtle is enough for some of you out there.